now. Just wait.
Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It has begun.
Yes. Hello, guys. Good evening to everyone. Today we have Mike Graves with us. He is the creative director of The Amazing World of Gumball and co-producer of the Elliot from Earth. Welcome, sir, and we appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you. No, it's great. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, you are welcome. So, guys, as you know, we have created a question pool, and I'm going to pick some questions and ask to
The easy
Sir
one.
Mike Graves. Yes. So, without further ado, I'm starting with my first question. When I made a small research about you, sir, in the internet, I found out that you have worked on projects like Big Nights and the Canterbury Tales. And those projects were historic, and I suppose they are not really relevant with the style of Gumball or the Elliot from Earth. And I would like to know how did that transition happened. You noticed, you found out that you were more into this kind of animation or not? I would like to hear it from you.
So those shows, I think the Canterbury Tales was from about 1998, and the Big Nights was from around the same time. The Big Nights was a show, the first show by Mark and Neville, who created Peppa Pig. And although it's historical, it's not really. It's kind of just a silly comedy show. With the Canterbury Tales, that was the first sort of short film pitch I won. I was very young at a commercial studio, and there was a company that was making adaptations of Shakespeare, Chaucer, operas, all for schools. And people were asked to submit designs and treatments for these things. And along with my co-director at the time, we won the pitch to get the Canterbury Tales one. I'd never read it, had no interest in it whatsoever. I just thought I just put some nice designs together and went, like any pitch, like the majority of my background is from working at a company called Studio AKA, which is chiefly a commercials company. They recently, well, in the last 5 or so years, they've moved into preschool television. But when I was there, it was all commercials. And so when you're doing commercials again and again and again, you kind of get very bored, and you're not challenged in terms of storytelling. And so I jumped off to do the Big Nights because it was a completely different thing. It was a TV series. It was funny, and it just gave me the opportunity to work with Mark Baker and Neville Astley, who are sort of really, they were sort of two heroes of mine. And the same with the Canterbury Tales. It was just nice to do something that wasn't 30 seconds long with a pack shot at the end of it.
Yeah, I totally get it. And I think, it's like a destiny of artists, working on projects which they are not really passionate about. But the way I see, I guess it's like a step that you have to confront and to work in passion projects.
Yeah, it helped me massively. My job on the Big Nights was assistant designer, but my job on the Canterbury Tales was director, and that was the first time I'd moved from designing commercials into actually directing something bigger. And so you need to sort of it's down to what opportunities you get. It's like something like that comes in. I didn't particularly care about the Canterbury Tales as a subject matter, but I thought, oh, okay, this is a cool chance to get to do some directing, get to do something longer. So you got to, if something comes along like that, you take it and try and learn from it.
Yeah, thank you, sir, for this great response. And I'm moving on with my next question. And we are a game design and game development club, and we are really keen on building universes and worlds and characters also.
Mm-hmm.
And in my games, I feel like I design and create my universe and characters according to my personal observations and personal memories. So I'm really curious about, the characters and the universe is completely unique and belongs to me, but I have to serve it to a wide audience, and I need to make sure that they find something in common to make them feel something. And I wonder, like, this is a really personal thing, and how can I serve it as an universal product which people can consume,
You can't. Short answer is you can't. The only thing you can do is do something that entertains and clicks with you. And, because if you're trying to second guess something, if you're trying to make sure it appeals to everybody, it's going to not be a single vision. It's going to not be something that's interesting to, because people don't always resonate with something that they recognize. They like to also be taken on a journey into something they don't know. That's the great part of storytelling, is seeing other opinions, other people's experiences. And so I would say, don't worry so much about it. Like the main thing is just to keep it entertaining to you. If you find it intriguing, entertaining, stimulating, then somebody else will, hopefully.
Yeah, thank you. Mehmet, you can ask your question if you want.
Yeah, how did working with European-based teams interact with American content culture? Were there any conflicts or adaptations? And as an European team, did you face difficulties reaching to American audience? Does the humor match between two cultures?
Good question. It's sort of something that we didn't think about, but it did come into effect quite a lot. Like the reason behind Gumball's existence was that stuff had been made for Cartoon Network in the States for a long time, and a producer here in London decided, well, why can't we do something in Europe? And he put together 4 pitches or 5 pitches for 5 different shows, and Gumball was the one that got picked. The intention was to always have it as an international show, as in to sell it to as many countries as possible. Certainly everybody here always sees America as the big market, and the shows that we see are American shows. We're like all the Cartoon Network shows that we were looking at the time. Back then it was things like Adventure Time, Chowder, Flapjack. All these shows were very American. They pretty much come straight out of Cal Arts. And I think actually the audience is broader than just America, because we consume that stuff in the UK, you consume that stuff, everybody all around the world consumes that stuff. And so Gumball's differentness, I think, was a sort of strength in that, yes, there was an entirely European crew. We had 1 or 2 Americans who, certainly if I was in the writing or something, I would run out in the middle of the writing, go up to our storyboard supervisor, Chuck, who was a American, and say, do Americans say this? And he'd go, no, that's... But then after a while, he'd been in the UK so long, he couldn't remember. So we'd go up and say, do Americans say this? And he'd go, I don't know, I haven't been there in 3 years. So I think, apart from certain language issues, certain use of language, we didn't care about that too much. We didn't worry about humor translating. We just put in stuff that we found funny and hoped that other people in other territories would. Obviously, you always look at, we had, our characters were voiced by American actors, most of whom lived in the UK, but the kids, Gumball, Anais, and Darwin, they were all American actors who lived in the US, and we would record them once a week over the internet. And, certainly some of the kids that played Gumball were old enough to go, I wouldn't say that's not how you say it. And you go, okay, just say it how you want to say it. And he'd say it in a much more American way. But there were, certainly Britishisms crept in there, because most of the writing crew was British. Ben, who's the show creator, he's French. So he's, and we had people from everywhere on the show, like so many different countries. So, and some of it was made in Ireland, some of it was made in Germany, some of it was made in France. So many Europeans involved.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for the answer.
Yeah. Then I'm moving on. I realized that in the episodes of Gumball, the episode follows a specific rhythm. You know, it starts with a problem and it arises to a peak, and then it falls down, and it's just like a perfect flow which never lets us feel boredom. And in the end, usually the the solution of the events end with like a suggestion or a life lesson to the, you know, everybody. And I would really, I'm really curious about, you know, did you aim to make this cartoon for children to, you know, educate them while entertaining them? And I would really like to listen this flow of story from you, Evet.
We never set out to preach or sort of teach moral lessons, but the morality of the characters could never be jeopardized. You know, you can't have the character making a bad decision and get away with it, because you sort of, it's an odd one, because you sort of the longer it goes on, the more you sort of know the characters and the more you have to honor them with what you're writing. So you sometimes find, you go, oh, we made a bad decision with that character in that episode. They did something out of character. We'd normally, you know, pretty much try and stay on the funny side of morality in terms of if it was a life lesson. In terms of the structure of an episode, myself and Ben, we had never written anything before. We were both complete strangers to the writing process. And with Gumball, when it first started, what normally happens with TV cartoons is a producer says, oh, I've hired a writer, they start on Monday. And the writer comes in and they hand you their script and you make it. And we read these scripts and they weren't very good. It's not necessarily the writer's fault, because the writer doesn't know what you want because you haven't done it yet. So certainly in the first season, we were going, oh, that's just not right. It's the wrong kind of jokes. It's the wrong kind of stuff. The story's boring. It feels very animation-y, you know, then suddenly 1,000 elephants fall from the sky and you go, no, it's just, it feels corny or something's wrong with it. And you ultimately, you don't have any other choice other than writing it yourself and learning how to write. And one of the things that helped us was to break down the stories into 3 acts. Your first act, your second act, and your third. First act, what is the problem? Second act, try multiple solutions to solving the problem. Third act, climactic solution to problem. So to melt it down into its simplest form, most of the episodes fit into that very rigid structure, to the point where when you're writing in a pattern like that, you also go, okay, we need to break that pattern, because you start to go, okay, I used to have a joke in the tech reviews where once we'd storyboarded, we'd move the show into technical review. So all of the senior heads of department would look at the show and break down how we were going to make it. And I would always joke that on scene 94 of every episode, Gumball and Darwin were in the middle of the screen running, saying, what are we going to do? So then I was desperate to avoid the scene 94 syndrome. So we changed it up and things like that. But basically what you'll find is the problem is presented. Quite often the problem is something to do with Gumball's take on something. He's caused the problem, you know, or he's waded into something he doesn't understand. He then goes about trying to fix what he's done in the wrong way. So there are multiple failed solutions, because also ultimately what we wanted from 10 minutes was jokes. So if you look at something like a classic comedy film, the stories, the plots are very simple. They're very basic, because you've got to hang jokes off them. So you can't really do both things at the same time. You can't be telling somebody the story and a joke at the same time. If you can, it's really good. When that works, it's perfect. But quite often you need a very simple story, a very straightforward story. So, you know, Gumball gets something wrong. He fails to fix it. Bingo, he comes up with the idea of how to fix it. Third act, right, race against time, because he's got to fix it before X happens. So that will also give the story some level of climactic urgency as well. You'll find that in a lot of the story patterns, and most entertainment, most film, you know, like there's normally a, you know, arbitrary time constraint at the end. We've got to do this before the world explodes, or the, you know, the ambassador is shot, or whatever it is. They put that in to make that third act feel more entertaining. So yeah, there is a pattern that we relied on as writers, because also when you're making a show, we had to write a new show in 3 to 4 days. So you're writing it very fast. You're also working on other stuff at the same time. You're storyboarding and stuff. So you need, wherever possible, you need patterns, even though it is your ultimately worst enemy, because then you're going to get bored, or your audience is going to get bored when they start to detect the patterns. So then you've got to shake it up and make it different. But they do, patterns and things like that do help you massively.
Yeah, that was the I wondered the most. Thank you for the answer. And now next question is, how do you manage the communication between different animation systems and 2D, 3D live background and powerful title board processes? And sometimes does technical layering limits you?
I always, like, everybody always looks at Gumball and says that's a difficult show to make. It looks like a difficult show to make. And actually, the most difficult aspect of Gumball was not the making of the show. It was dealing with the producers and the executives and all that side of it. That was much more like hard work. We had such phenomenal, talented crew members on the show. People that did the backgrounds, they did layouts, they did storyboards, they did CG and 2D, that so much of that was in the hands of very talented people. That said, you know, the original concept from the short was that Gumball and Darwin, Gumball was 2D and Darwin was 3D. And we very, very quickly found out in process of boarding and trying to get the thing made that we had to have the majority of our key characters in 2D, because the pipeline in terms of if you have a storyboard and then you have your layout, which tended to be in Photoshop or something flat. Most of the backgrounds were flat artwork, they weren't CG. So your layout would essentially be in After Effects, and you'd have your flat background and your flat characters. If you then had to bring that into 3D package, then obviously that's another step. And so then the producers would come in and go, that's an expensive step. And you'd go, ah, okay, so what if Darwin is 2D? And then you have 2 steps instead of 3 steps. And so that was a constant argument. That was, you know, that fight. What was really interesting and kind of dumb as well is that I normally about 3/4 of the way through any series, the producer would run in and go, oh my God, we're massively over in 3D. And you go, okay, all right, let me look at the next 5 shows. I'll swap out characters. I'll swap out the 3D characters for some 2D characters. And then literally 4 weeks later, same producer would come in and go, we're massively over in 2D. And you'd go, yeah, because there's a finite, like you can't have one. It never made sense to these people. But you know, it would be a constant situation of we would have to do things like that. Like if something became particularly expensive and time consuming to do, we'd have to sit down and go, okay, we can't do it. We genuinely can't do it. So what can we do? Can we lock off the camera? Can we reduce this to a photographic background when it should be a 3D background? Can we swap out 3D characters for 2D characters? Lots of stuff like that, you know, cheats. And I think that actually is one of the, even though it's annoying at the time, it's one of the great things about working fast with a really great crew of people, is that there's an energy in that people come up with great ideas, really good solutions. And even though you think it's the end of the world at that moment, it's not. It's fine. It still looks good. It sometimes looks better than it would have done. So it's, you know, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, and sometimes, you know, the limits which producers set and all technical limits can, I believe, create a creativeness and some different ideas and animations to, you know, blow up.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, you know, like if you look at the work of great film directors, when they're given massive budgets and, you know, infinite resources, they tend to come out with turkeys. Like, you know, and constraints are good. You know, they can be really good. Like they can make you think around something. And an idea is essentially, people are watching ideas. All content is ideas. Doesn't matter if that idea is an expensive idea or a cheap idea. If it's a good idea, then it entertains you.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree. And when we open the Google form on Instagram to collect some questions in order to ask you, lots of people ask us about this in particular.
Okay.
You know, the most of the people in their daily life do different things than animation or art. You know, sometimes in order to make living, or I don't know, they become engineers, they work white collar jobs in companies, and they were curious about, is it possible to pursue a career in art or especially in animation while being dealing with the daily responsibilities like working in a other job, etc., school, or I don't know.
I think it would be extremely tricky. It's always been difficult. It's never been easy to break into something like this. You know, from my experience, you know, I was applying for jobs for about a year, and then I took a job as a runner, which is basically a studio dog's body, and, you know, just did anything around the studio, got people's lunches and stuff like that, and it paid incredibly badly, and like, you know, I did that for quite a few years, but once you're in the right place. So, you know, it's then if something comes in, there are opportunities, there are things like that. But I think to try and do it, I mean, it's down to individuals. If somebody's making a film in the evenings and the weekends after work, and they put it out there and people love it, then it will get snapped up. And so, yes, it's possible, but it's just even more hard work than working in the industry and trying to make it as well.
Yeah, and do you think that coming from different backgrounds, you know, different than like formal art education or animation education, enriches the artistic expression, you know?
Absolutely, because I think what I've found, certainly in my career, I've been working in it long enough to have seen the change in the types of people that I get to work with. And when I originally started, it was, you know, it was back in the black and white days. People were still cell painting in 2D animation. So I came in, and that was just on its way out before the shift to digital cell paint and then, you know, 3D packages. And so a lot of those people had done different jobs, and a lot of those people had lived interesting lives. And later on down the line, I'd come into work, and every single person I worked with had studied animation, and none of them had interesting lives. No, but not literally, but basically they all studied animation for whatever reason. They wanted to be animators since they were born or something, and then they got their animation job, and they tended to all go to the two big French colleges, Gobelin and Superfocom, those two colleges. So they tended to be just basically animation people. And it was a lot less diverse as a group of people than previously in the animation industry. Because I genuinely think as well that diversity of background, that diversity of life experience is going to inform. It's not just going to make you a more interesting person to work next to. It's just going to inform what you're doing and make your work more interesting.
Yeah, I definitely agree also. You mentioned the beginnings of your career, but I would like to ask, you know, what was the quality or skill that made you accepted and get hired in a studio like Cartoon Network? You know, how did your journey started?
With Cartoon, well, my actual, like literally the skill that got me hired originally at Studio AKA was the fact that I used to be a cleaner in a psychiatric hospital. So I was a cleaner, like between I was at college, and between sort of in term, like breaks in term and stuff like that, I would, in holiday time, I would have to earn money by doing this job, cleaning in this high security psychiatric hospital. And I did that for a few years. And then when my CV dropped into Studio AKA, Pam, the managing director, went, "Oh, I see you've got cleaning experience." And that's what got me into the industry. Not my portfolio of life drawings, not my short film, not any of it. It was literally that. And then once in, I was lucky enough to sort of do designs and stuff, and people giving me opportunities and chances and putting, you know, get like winning pitches in designs. And so by the time I got the job at Cartoon Network, I didn't really aim for a job at Cartoon Network. What happened with that was they set up in the UK, and I'd previously, with the short film, I'd won a BAFTA and got an Oscar nomination. So that pushed me up the list in terms of, you know, that's what it does. It just, you know, awards are, they sort of bring you to the attention of other people, people that who you're not on their radar, and then suddenly you are. So that pushed me up into the level of, okay, if there's going to be a show made in the UK, there's only really 4 or 5 people that are qualified, or, you know, because it was a big deal. It was the highest budget show that had ever been made in the UK. It was a sort of American show coming here. And the producer, one of the producers at the time, I'd worked with him on another series called Monkey Dust, which was an adult animated comedy show. And he'd contacted me and said, "Can you come over to Cartoon Network and look at the 4 different show pitches? And one of these is going to get a green light, and whichever one does, we want you as director of it." I was like, oh, okay, cool. You know, because that was kind of nearly what I wanted to do. It was too, at the time, it was too babyish. The shows were all very young. You know, they're all very, like the pilot of Gumball is very young, and it was like not really as interesting as where it went, where we took it eventually. But they were all very young. All the pilots for all the 4 shows were all very, not preschool, but just a little bit older than preschool, but not up there with things like Adventure Time, or, you know, they didn't have a better sense of humor. But basically that was how I sort of got to Cartoon Network, not really directly, and not through any sort of great ambition of I must work with those guys. It was just, you know, it was just sort of knowing people, being on the radar, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Now the next question is, were there any scenes in Gumball you want to do perfectly but you couldn't due to channel intervention or censorship?
All of it. Like well, I think what's interesting is what we tried to do with Gumball was find our tone. You know, what is the tone? Where is the comedy? What are we going for? And if you go too adult with it, the temptation is to go vulgar, you know, is to sort of, and you don't want to do that, because that's also, because there are 6-year-olds watching this stuff, you know, and you'd never forgive yourself. So what we tended to do, I think, particularly in the writing, we all write from a dark place. Like, you know, what is the sickest, weirdest, like most messed up thing you can think of? That's very funny to everybody. And then you go, okay, how do we get that into the show? We change it, we tweak it, we shift it, but we still try and retain the spirit of it, the energy of that messed upness to it, to try and so I think I wouldn't say that there are any jokes or storylines that we weren't allowed to do or anything like that we wanted to do, but they wouldn't let us. It's more like technically the shortcuts we had to do quite often, the budgetary restraints, things like that. I wished I had more time on some things. I wished, you know, I don't ever watch the show. I never watch it. I haven't. As soon as I finish it, I never see it again, because I can't watch it, because for me, it just looks like a sequence of compromises. You know, it's just like, okay, that could have been better. That should have been better. You know, like, so for me, it's more that kind of stuff that I sort of feel like, you know, you like you'll see things and you go, oh, that's slightly mistimed, that's slightly misstaged, that should have been a cut to the wide there. We shouldn't have stayed up, you know, and it will sort of drive you insane because you kind of you have to make those decisions. Everything's moving so fast when you're making a show. Like when I was at the height of production in Gumball, I would normally have 25 separate episodes in my head at the same time. So because everything would be staggered over the top of each other. So you're having to make decisions incredibly fast. Like, and sometimes instinct and sometimes adrenaline means that's the right decision, and sometimes it's not, and it could have been better. So, you know, that's more the regrets rather than anything that we tried to get away with and weren't allowed to. We didn't really, you know, there would be some little, you know, they'd take out a line here or there. Like one of the ones that really upset me at the time was, I think that episode called The Bus, where each of the dads were playing, pretending to be outlaws or something like that. And they'd each given themselves code names. And Alan, who's a balloon, his dad was called Hindenburg, and he was dressed as Heisenberg in Breaking Bad. And I thought that was so clever, and I wanted to keep it. And they said, "You can't have it." And I was like, "Well, why not? Why not Hindenburg? Surely it's not too soon." Like they just went, "Oh, kids won't understand it." And I went, "Well, then fine, you know, that doesn't matter." But they just disallowed it, and it was like, "Well, why disallow that? It doesn't really make sense." But had to give it up.
Yeah, that's really pity. And I think adults also watch Gumball, and I used to watch Gumball when I was a kid, and I'm 18 years old and I still watch it, you know. Yeah.
I think that's in that, like, we made it for ourselves. We didn't want to get bored watching it. We, you know, we knew that we wanted a high joke count. We wanted different types of jokes, physical jokes, verbal jokes, conceptual jokes, all sorts of stuff, so that basically, like, it's difficult to get bored watching an episode because we try and mix it up all the time. You know, we don't want one kind of tonal thing happening all the way through the 10 minutes. We've got to mix that up and just go, okay, we've had three kind of talky jokes in a row, let's do something physical. So it was always about that. And certainly the desire was not really to entertain parents and kids. It was just to entertain us. You know, it's just like, what do we find funny? As soon as you find it funny, you put it in a script, somebody else is going to find it funny. So hopefully, like,
Yeah. Yeah. And could you tell us about your experience of the collaborative creative process with Tony Hall, the Elliot from the Earth? And
yes.
how did you manage the division of labor, production responsibilities, and if you had any conflicts of vision?
So I met Tony and Richard. Tony and Richard were our two editors on Gumball. And what used to happen, like, throughout the process, the show falls apart at every single opportunity. So when you're writing a script, it's sort of only just hanging together and starting to fall apart. You pass it to the storyboard department, it's sort of just hanging together and starting to fall apart. The last stage is really edit. That's the last stage before you go. You have to deliver your fully finished animatic from which everything is made. So you got your, you know, your animatic is locked. So you got all your voices, your timing, your staging, storyboard, everything. And I worked with Tony and Richard on that stage. And what would normally happen is that we'd be sat there looking at a show going, it doesn't work. It's rubbish. It's crap. It doesn't work. What do we do? And so we'd be sitting there with Tony and Richard, and they'd both help massively. They'd have joke suggestions, they'd have story suggestions, and they both became very key creative inputs to the show, like to the point where later on in the 5th or 6th season, they started coming into the writing room and trying to write episodes with us. And so that's where I wrote episodes with Richard, the editor, and I wrote episodes with Tony. And with Tony, what was really odd about Elliot from Earth was that the the show totally collapsed. The show had a showrunner called Guillaume Cassuto, and it was developed by him and the producer Sarah. And I was hired as an exec producer to just come in and oversee. Mm-hmm. But I quickly realized that the scripts they were writing were bad, very bad. And what they were doing, they were copying and pasting chunks of old Gumball scripts into their scripts. And the producers were fine with this. They just said, "I'll make it Gumball in space." And it was like, what? Like, I turned up halfway. I think they were about 2 months in. I turned up and I was like, "You can't do this. This is not right." And so we tried to get the showrunner to step up and write better stuff, but he would just go, "I think it's all great. It's fine." And you'd sort of go over the scripts with notes and stuff, and he would refuse any notes and just go, no, it all works. And I've never been on a show where somebody goes, "It all works," on first pass. And you go, "It doesn't work first pass. Nothing ever works first pass." In 240 episodes and 6 seasons of Gumball, there were less than 5 scripts that went all the way through the process without significant changes. And that's normal. That is fine. That is absolutely fine. So when Elliot from Earth crumbled as a production, we were asked by the Cartoon Network guys. They said, "Right, we're going to get rid of the showrunner. Mick, we want you to be the showrunner with your editor, Tony. Start making the show now. We're already halfway through." And so we just basically went, right, okay. We locked ourselves in a room and started writing and making the show all at the same time, trying to invent the whole thing, because the development of the show had been so bad. There were no solutions for anything. There was no ideas about, well, why is he there? Why is he in space? What's he doing in space? Like, all these ideas had not been answered. So we had to rush it. And you know, it is what it is. It's not, we were very, like, thanks to, again, to a phenomenal crew, but we got something on screen, but it was an absolute disaster. It was like a full meltdown. And so Tony coming in as an editor, because he started a few months after me, and I'd been banging my head against the wall trying to get the showrunner to write better scripts, and I'd sort of almost given up. I was like, oh, maybe it should just be rubbish. Maybe it just should be crap. Maybe that's okay. Like, and then Tony and the producers were all going, yes, it should be crap. That's fine. Like that. And I was like, should it be? And I was kind of delirious. And then Tony, the editor, he started and went, "This is crap." Yes, it is crap, isn't it? Because I felt like I was going mad on my own. They were all going, everything's fine. This is, this substandard work is absolutely fine. And you'd go, is it? Or am I going mad? And Tony came in and was just like, "It's got to be better than this." And we're like, okay, all right, you and me, let's make it better. So we tried. We got it over the finish line. We got 16 episodes done, I think, of which probably 2 were good. But you got to give it a go.
Yeah. Compromises have to be made. And I would like to talk a bit about the music in Gumball. Those musics affected us a lot. And there is a quote from Mr. Ben Bukaret. He said, "One week Ben rang me. This week you are doing the 1980s pastiche. Next week he needed Beethoven, then a hip hop track."
Yep.
Although choosing such diverse musics enriched the series, how did it challenge the team? Have you ever been in situations where you couldn't find enough music?
It's amazing. It was one of the things that I never predicted, was how broad the music was going to have to be in the show. Because when we originally started, Ben Bockley had briefed the musician, Ben Lockett, that the whole show should be electronic music, should all be electronic, and very synthesized and very sort of out there. And about 2 or 3 animatics in, there was a big argument because the exec producer Daniel came in and went, it's an assault on the senses. Nothing makes sense. The music's going blah, 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 the visuals are going blah, 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 nothing reads. And so Daniel said, make all the music very conventional, ground the show with conventional string-based, you know, sort of cinematic or television, you know, very, very, bring it down. And that was a really good call, because the visuals and the energy of the show needed something to sort of rein it in and stabilize it a bit. It wasn't great for Ben Lockett, the composer, because I saw him go completely red in the meeting where he realized that he had to rescore about 5 episodes, and it just massively inflated the work he was done. And it was completely contradictory to the brief he'd received as well. So he was like, okay, but he did a fantastic job. And the tricky thing is, because we skip genre, like shows could be in a separate genre. We'd do a scary show, but also within a show, you could have multiple genres. So a joke would provoke a genre, you know, so there would be a joke where, like you said, Gumball would be pastiching a hip hop video, or Gumball would be doing, you know, some kind of folk dance or something like that. For the purpose of the joke, which may be, you know, maybe no more than 5 or 6 seconds, that now needs a full piece of score for that to work. And so we also had other musicians we could call on. One of our really great pastiche musicians, the one that did all the 80s power rock ballad stuff, a guy called Willie Dowling, he would do those. We had, we also had library stuff. If we really got to a panic of like, okay, we need something in here and there is no time to do this, we can access certain library stuff. So Richard, our editor, he got very, very good at accessing libraries and remixing things. But also, like, we had a joke where it was a Star Wars pastiche, and somebody has to come into a bar and they're doing a like that. Of course, we can't use that. So in the mix, Richard just pulls out a keyboard and goes, what about fine, in, like that. So it's fast, and you have to just go, like, you know, you have to just go with what you need and as close to what you can get, because there's also, you know, there's also legal parameters in there. Like, we would score, Richard would temp score things with John Williams music. So when he's putting an animatic together, before the composer has had the chance to go near the episode, Richard is temp scoring it with John Williams music, Jerry Goldsmith music, Alan Silvestri music, you know, like great film scores. And this would arrive on our composer's desk, and he'd go, right, I gotta get something that sounds like John Williams but isn't legally, like, you know. It's very difficult. It's very, very hard, and people working so fast as well. But I think the person most responsible for sort of pulling that music together was probably Richard, the editor, who he's very good musically, and he also he had, you know, he had Ben Lockett on one phone, he had Willie Dowling on another, he had library music, and when he needed to, he would also just do stuff and put it in, like.
Oh. That's really interesting to hear. And in one of my questions, I had, you know, how did you manage to create a show whose episodes are so creative, unique? But I think as far as I'm concerned, you know, you were always in a rush. You were always facing problems, and you find out solutions, and you did your best in a limited amount of time. And you made the thing you find fun. Maybe that's the key to a, you know, creation of an artistic product.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's going to give you enough time to do something. Nobody's going to do that. There's always going to be a constraint on what you're doing, whether it's time or money or both. And so you just, you know, and what's great with working with other people as well is when you get relationships where you trust what they're going to bring to it. You know that storyboard artist is going to knock it out of the park. You know that composer is going to bring you something great, or that editor is going to absolutely save a bad show, you know. So, yeah. So when you're working with good people, and I think that's the thing that helps you so much when you're having to work so fast, is just relying on and trusting and seeing that people just take that responsibility and run with it rather than sort of just, you know, not give 100% or something.
Yeah, thank you. And we have last 10 minutes right now, just a heads up. And I'm moving with my next question. If you have any especially important advice for people who come from abroad to work with you, we would love to hear it.
Careful what you wish for.
Because, you know, everybody asks us, you know, how can I improve myself according to my grades? What should I do? What should I do to break into the industry? You know?
Do what I do, which, I mean, I have to work for other people. I work for networks, you know, and it's getting on the radar of those people, because that's what really gets you the gig. You know, it's like you've got to, like, and I think what's good now is that certainly in the last few productions that I've done, it doesn't really matter where you are. It matters a lot less where you are, because people, thanks to a global pandemic, people are a lot more used to working remotely. So,
Yeah.
you know, people, it has opened up opportunities. Like I'm currently working with Disney, and you know, I'm here, they're in LA. There's an artist on the other side of America and character designer somewhere else, and you know, it's opened that up a lot more, I think. But it still comes down to the work. You know, it still comes down to getting your work out there, getting people to see, getting the right people to see your work, getting it in front of the networks and the people that make the decisions, who tend to be the production team, you know, the producers and stuff like that. Those are the ones that tend to assemble the teams.
Yeah. And there is one topic I think which is quite popular these days, you know, AI, artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in games and in animations, everybody is afraid of AI, that will take our jobs and we will be jobless. But, you know, what do you think about this? You know,
a part of me is extremely relieved that I'm stumbling towards the end of my career and not at the start. It would have been it's terrifying, but another huge percentage of me is really excited at what it does, because I've sort of come up with visuals in Midjourney and stuff like that, and I love it. I love it. It's just so immediate and nuts. You know, I just love it. You know, I guarantee you, although I'm not involved in it, the new series of Gumball will have loads of AI stuff. I'm sure it'll have AI jokes and stuff like that. Like, you can't avoid it. It's, you know, it's bigger than all of us. It's going to happen, and everybody's asking the same question: is, well, how will it affect my work? I think, having used it, I love it for generating ideas, but it can't so far give you the end result. It can't give you something specific. It's hard to steer. It's hard to specify, and you know, that will improve, obviously. But for now, I really love the madness it comes up with. I love that. I love that it's sort of turned things on its head. In what used to be extremely difficult, which was getting something to look very real, is now extremely easy. But to get something to look stylized and simple is hard for it, because that involves a lot more human synthesis to the medium. But yeah, I mean, I'll be out of work in 6 months probably.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Then I'm finishing with my last question. And this is a bit personal, but I would like to ask you. You know, I really wonder your relationship with your audiences. You know, in games, we usually do playtest, you know, every stage in the production. You know, with normal people, random players, we make them test the product. But when I researched you on the net, I couldn't encounter, you know, too many interviews of you. And I would like to know that your interactions with your audience based on face-to-face communication, or, you know, I would like to know that.
I think when I've been making stuff, it is such a panic. It's happening so fast that there is no point at all to even take a breath, let alone put it in front of people and see what they think. I've never been on a production where it had the luxury of being able to stop and review what you're doing. Not once. Like, you just have to make it so fast. And the first time, the only time I've ever sat and watched Gumball with an audience was when we finished the first season. The network had no confidence in it at all. They were going to dump it, I think. It was just, you know, it's just like they didn't really care. And they did a focus group at a school. They took the show to a local school and they put us at the back of the room like that. And they played it for some kids. And the kids sat and watched all 10 minutes of the episode, didn't say a thing, no reaction, not a single laugh, like that. And we just thought, we're dead. We're finished. And then we left, and the person organizing the thing came out and then went, they loved it. And they did. Like, somebody tell their faces, because they stared at it. Like, what was fascinating to me was that we did, I think one of the episodes, it had a Tina the T-Rex chasing the kids around a car dump, a car recycling plant or whatever. And we nicked a couple of shots from Jurassic Park. We nicked a bit where Tina comes down and the eye is next to the car window that the kids are in, and they flinch like that. And watching 6-year-olds watch it, you realize they have no frame of reference for Jurassic Park. They hadn't seen it. They didn't know what it was. So they reacted to those shots innately, and they were like really scared. Like, oh wow, it sort of works, you know, because you're like, we genuinely never saw it with audiences. We were just working too fast, in too much of a panic, a hectic, like, I always use the analogy that making the show was literally like Indiana Jones with that huge ball behind you constantly. It's constantly rolling, and the longer you're into the show, the bigger the ball gets, because you've got more and more departments added to the ball. You've got animation, you've got sound, you've got so much stuff. And if you trip up, you're dead. Like, you can't, you know, everything that fails knocks you over. So every script that isn't working, every storyboard that's taking 2 days longer than it should have done, every design that doesn't look right trips you up, and that ball is getting closer, and you get up again, and it's so the luxury of showing it to an audience just really never happened for us. We never really saw it. And also, I think we made it, we started in 2009 and we finished in 2019, and people never really talked. I never really heard any feedback from it until around about 2018. People had started going, you know, you'd start to hear people say, oh, it's a good show. And that was it. You know, you wouldn't get like any kind of big hoo-ha about it.
Yeah. Sir, we appreciate a lot that you, for your precious time, valuable time.
That's right.
And it was an honor and pleasure to chat with you for an hour. Really, thanks a lot.
No problem.
Yeah, and especially, you know, Gumball has a, you know, incredible meaning for us. You know, it shaped our childhood. You know, literally, it shaped our childhood.
You're all messed up. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks again. And guys, today we are done. We were with Mr. Mike Graves. It was one of our best streams ever, I guess. So good evening and take care of yourselves. Bye.